Well, it's Memorial Day, 2019. Not exactly sure how that happened. I was looking back at my post and realized I have not posted anything in about 2 years. So I figured today would be a good day to pick up where we left off, telling stories about my life and the things that happened so that when my grandkids and great-grandkids and great-great-grandkids grow up, they may find this record and actually know a little bit more about me and about my life. So that's the idea. I'm not in the greenhouse. It is the end of May. It's actually very, very hot. It's been 95 degrees Fahrenheit for the last few days and probably going to hit that again today. So it's pretty warm out here. So I am out instead by one of my raised bed gardens, and I figured that was appropriate because what I want to talk about today is my grandfather. Now, my grandfather, William E. Frazier, was born and raised in Cobb County, Georgia, and this being Memorial Day, we always go to his gravesite and put a flag on it. My granddad served in World War II. He was in Burma in the Army Air Corps, and he flew in a transport plane flying the hump. He was a radio operator, a tech sergeant, and he came back from the war, and then, my mom was actually already born, and then my aunt was born, and he worked at a hardware store in Atlanta for the rest of his life until he retired, and then he passed away. And my granddad was an interesting man. One of the things, though, about his war experiences is that he very rarely talked about it. He didn't share a whole lot about what happened in that 4 years when he was over in Burma. And so today, I just wanted to share the handful of stories that my grandfather shared with me about his experience in World War II. My granddad, like I said, was in Burma. We have some postcards, we have a few letters, and a couple of photographs of him when he was there during the war. But they don't really tell much of the story. And like I said, he didn't talk about it much, but he did tell a few stories. One of the things about my grandfather, when he got home from the war, he said there were 3 things he would never do again. He would never ride in another boat, he would never fly in another airplane, and he would never eat another mouthful of rice. And to my knowledge, he never did any of those 3 things again after he got back from his experience in Burma. The rice. He told the story when they were trying to get the Chinese army to move against the Japanese. They would get up in their planes and they would take the rice for the Chinese army, and he said they would fly about a mile ahead of where the army was. They would drop the rice, and to quote Bill Frazier, the Chinese would fight like hell till they got to the rice, and then they would stop, set up camp, and eat. And the next day they would go and they would fly another mile, and they would drop the rice, and they would fight till they got to the rice. And that was his experience with rice. So I understand why he probably didn't want to eat any rice. With boats, he did tell the story one time about a good friend. They were crossing a river, and apparently it was monsoon season, and the river had swollen and was very fast, and his friend fell overboard and was swept down the river and drowned. I have no idea what the man's name was. I just know that happened, and I assume that's one of the reasons he was not very fond of boats. It was pretty dangerous to be out in a boat. And certainly flying in airplanes, I understand. He was in a C-47, which also known as a DC-3. You can go look that up if you want to. Did not have a pressurized cabin. And if you look at Burma, what they were doing, they were actually flying the hump. That is, they were flying up over the Himalayan mountains to the other side to bring supplies to the army. Which means that they were leaving a hellishly hot jungle atmosphere and then flying up where it was bitterly cold, and they had no heat in the aircraft. There was no, like I said, the cabin's not pressurized. There was no way to have heat in it, so they froze while they were up there, would come down the other side into the hot, humid jungle, bring the supplies, and they would do that again all the time, of course, the Japanese Air Force was doing the very best they could to kill them. And so flying was a stressful thing for all those men in the war. And for my grandfather, like I said, he said when he got back off of that final flight back to the United States, he would never, ever, ever climb into another airplane. And as far as I know, he never did. One time, when I was about 9 years old, 9 or 10 I guess, it was a rainy afternoon, probably was a Sunday because my grandfather worked 6 days a week and he was off on Sunday. And he took us, me and my brother, and to the lit den there, and he pulled out his old Foot Locker. And I remember him pulling out his Foot Locker and opening it up and showing us all of his medals and showing us some photographs and the postcards and his mementos from the war, and telling us these handful of stories about what his experience was like. And then he put everything back in the Foot Locker, closed it up, put it back up in that closet, and he never talked about those things with me again. And so I believe that the men who fought in World War II came home, and yes, my grandfather did not die in the war, but he lost a lot in that war experience. And so that's why I feel it's very, very important on Memorial Day to go and put a flag on his grave and remember him, because he gave his life for this country. He served and he sacrificed greatly so that we can have the freedoms that we enjoy now. And it's always been important to me. It's important that my children always went, and they still go when they can, and my granddaughter goes, and my hope is that after I'm dead and gone, Bill Frazier will be remembered, and people will still be going to his grave on Memorial Day 100 years from now, telling the same handful of stories and remembering this very, very important person in my life who sacrificed so much so that we can be free. Anyway, that's my story for the day. I can tell more stories about my grandfather, but we'll leave it here for right now. Glad to be back, and I'll try to do more of this in the days ahead. Have a great day. Happy Memorial Day, if that's even an appropriate thing to say. Salute.